Not only is the show so obsessed with just rushing over to the sex scenes, but they completely skip over necessary characterization and build up to earn these moments. But then something happened. Woof, okay, trying something new. I'm a bit nervous of how it is that people are going to react to this, because this one is a heated one. I didn't really expect to check this out nor make a video about it. I mean, normally when I check things out, I usually go for things that I either hear about myself or that people around me, like in my circle or following, talk about. But this one is quite different. So prior to watching Heated Rivalry, I've heard about this show precisely 3 times. The first time was around a month ago when a friend of mine wrote to me and said, this is the most talked about show in the world. I was like, oh, alright. Then it was maybe like 3 weeks ago that I saw a tweet about Pluribus, and I remember that Heated Rivalry was mentioned in there. I don't remember tweet, I don't remember much of the context, I just remember reacting of like, oh, okay, this is the second time I've heard about the most talked about thing in the world. And then just a few days ago, my sister apparently told me that this is the biggest and most talked about thing in Sweden right now. So I tried to look a little bit more at it and like reviews and what people think about the whole thing. And the people who review it always talk about it as the most talked about thing in the world, but that talk never really reaches me. I mean, I feel like I am chronically online, so I feel like it would have reached me in some way. But I guess we just all have different algorithms, isn't it? But anyways, I watched Heated Rivalry, the show that is talked about as the gay hockey show. And I want to share with you guys my thoughts on it, but before I do that, I feel like I have to explain a little bit of how it is that I'm going to review this show. Because I know the internet, and I know that there's a lot of people who's going to react in different ways depending on how I will review the show. Because if it was that I said that this is the greatest show of all time, then a lot of people would say like,
this show is so good that it captures the straight male audience as well.
And if I said that it was a bad show, I feel like the same people would say,
well, but why would I care about a straight guy's opinion on this show? The show's not made for it.
Now, I also understand that movies and TV and stories in general are made with a target audience in mind. Genres and styles are made for a certain demographic. However, I'm quite a firm believer that plot, characters, world building and themes are universal. That the core of a story is something that transcends gender, sexuality, race, economic background, so whatever. I feel like the core of a story is something that goes beyond that. I might be uninterested in medieval action fights, but I can appreciate the idea of redemption and wanting to give whatever you can for another life and cause. I might be uninterested in boxing, but I can appreciate the idea of culminating everything that you have been taught from your broken family bond. I might be uninterested in cooking, but I can appreciate the idea of an unexpected outsider earning the trust to express themselves artistically. Which is why I never really liked the sentiment of some stories are not made for you. Because I think that well-written stories are universal, given that they are based in human experiences that basically anyone can relate to. And that's also how I try to go about it in criticism. I try to remove the things that can be genre-specific or something like that. I mean, as much as I adore Die Hard's action scenes, I love the movie for the excellent character work and plot. As much as I love the suggestive horror sequences in The Shining, I love the movie for the deeply uncomfortable thematics and psychology of the characters. As much as I love the war fights in Saving Private Ryan, I love the movie for the realism that it brings and the brotherhood that forms in between these characters. And what I'm trying to say with all of this is that I think a show like Heated Rivalry that has the selling point of very hot and sexual tension and sequences can also be judged for its plot, characters and theme and how they hold up. And I hate to say it, Heated Rivalry is not a very good show. Oh god, I've already gone 12 rounds with the Stranger Things fandom. I can only imagine what this fandom will be like. Okay, the thing is, it's definitely not all bad. Let me walk you guys through my experience of just starting to watch the show in the beginning. Because the first chunk of the first episode set the tone quite a bit for the rest of the show, and for me it didn't really change going forward. So episode 1 introduces our 2 main characters, which is Ilya and Shane. And quickly I'm hit with that they have built this story on a very basic and generic foundation foundation. We get the one kid that's not very confident and shy, coming from a loving and supporting yet wealthy and driven family, versus the kid who is very confident and confronting that comes from quite a rough and toxic family background. Which is not a bad thing in itself. There's plenty of stories that is built on the same basic foundation but are fantastic in their execution of the whole thing. So it is all about what Jacob Tierney decides to do with these characters in terms of development, dynamics, and thematics. Then they both can't sleep and they both go to the gym in the middle of the night at the same time. Alone in there, they both go on the separate, like, exercise bikes to race? Or have, like, an exercise off? Like, this scene is weird because they clearly want to show both of their competitive sides and how that can lead into intrigue and attraction towards the other person. But they don't actually show what's happening in this scene. We don't see, like, any speed or distance or anything like that. I mean, I would have assumed that this scene would have been written as, in the beginning, Ilya being the faster and more explosive one, but over time, maybe Shane could win in distance or something because of his superior cardio or conditioning. That way, showing something about the characters, that Ilya is a bit more spontaneous and impulsive, while Shane is a bit more careful and calculated. Or just in some way use this set piece to establish something about these characters. But this scene is filmed just with close-ups of their faces, their feet, and the super heavy breathing that's happening. We have no idea what's happening in the character's mind and what they're actually striving towards in this moment. So this scene has actively ignored character and thematics for the sake of sexual aesthetics. So when I saw that scene, my mind just went to, okay, that's a pretty bad scene and a pretty bad approach. But hey, I've only just started. Maybe it will improve later. We get some more moments of light characterization, and then they are both in the shower and looking quite intensely at each other. And here I'm thinking, oh, I thought this would be a show that would tackle the aspect of gay guys in hockey needing to stay closeted because of the ingrained homophobia in the sport. So then my brain was thinking like, oh, okay, well, Ilya is very openly gay and Shane does nothing to try and hide it either, so I'm guessing the show is just not really going to deal with those thematics. So then they go to the next scene where they go to their room and they initiate sex like right away, and I'm like, okay, this feels very devoid of build-up and character, but yeah, we'll see how it goes.
This is your first time with the man?
What? Okay, I'm not very impressed with this show so far. Not only is the show so obsessed with just rushing over to the sex scenes, but they completely skip over necessary characterization and build up to earn these moments. Okay, let me fully explain what I'm thinking over here. Something that we really need to remember over here is that none of these guys know each other, and it is in their best interest to keep it a secret that they are homosexuals. And the thing is, from that perspective, I kind of buy Ilya's behavior, since he is someone who is so confident and out there. Starting to masturbate in front of another guy in the shower feels like something he could do just to mess with other people. Because at this point, we don't even know if Ilya thinks that Shane is gay, bi, or straight, or whatever. Because given the world in 2009, and especially the hockey world in 2009, it is very reasonable for both of these guys to assume that the other one is straight. And trust me, in real life, there's been a lot of like jock bully type of guys who have just done this towards other people just to mess around with them. However, Shane would never be this open about his attraction. Like, bear in mind that he comes from quite a wealthy family where he has been taught to think about his public appearance a lot. So even showing an ounce of gayness is a huge risk for him. So with the setup of these characters and what they have been shown as and what the situation is like, right when Ilya starts touching himself in front of Shane, Shane would immediately turn away and be like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Because him blatantly showing his attraction like this is not something you would do in this situation with someone that you don't trust. And especially not towards the person that is your rival and having their best interest to jeopardize your career. I mean, think about it. Ilya has the reputation of a ladies' man, so him doing something like this should immediately be read as a way of him just messing around with the other person. And that would of course put Shane under a lot of pressure. And don't misunderstand me in what it is that I'm saying right now. I'm purely talking about what Shane should think that Ilya would do and what Ilya should think that Shane would do in this instance. It doesn't make sense that they would both be so blatantly open with their attraction to the other person. Both from the perspective that their sexuality is a secret in this world, but especially from the perspective that this is the first time Shane is ever with a dude before. So the first 20 minutes of episode 1 showed me what kind of approach they have towards this whole thing. They are either contriving or skipping over important characterization just to get to the sex scenes. And this is what people need to realize. This is no different different than 50 Shades of Grey, where they contrive insane character and plot moments just to get to the sex scenes. This is no different than 365 Days, where they string together insane plot moments just to get to the sex scenes. And to clarify, I do think that everything that happens around the sex scenes in 50 Shades and 365 Days is worse than this, but it's still the same approach. You skip over all the important parts of the story just to get to the sex scenes. So at this point, it didn't look like I was gonna get any interesting characters, thematics, plot development, conflict, or anything like that. Even a few scenes later, when Shane said that he was in a rabbit hole on YouTube.
What was yours about?
Unlikely animals becoming friends.
Bro. Are you for real? Is this your attempt at doing metaphors? Like, imagine seeing Lord of the Rings and hearing Frodo say, I once read this book about an unlikely creature going on an insane adventure. Fucking hell, you could just post this straight to I'm 14 and this is deep, innit? So as you can hear, I was very unimpressed with episode 1, and I think episode 2 just had more of the exact same issues. Empty characterization, contrived conflicts, and really cringy dialogue. But then something happened. I started episode 3, titled Scotts, and this episode is an entirely separate storyline about two characters called Kip and Scott, and it's pretty great. Now, in the same way that the first 20 minutes of episode 1 set the tone for that entire storyline, the first 20 minutes of episode 3 did the same for that storyline, just in a really, really good way. Here we see the two guys in the smoothie shop kind of checking each other out, just like Ilya and Shane did, but this time is way more believable as both of them kind of try to hide it a little bit from the other. Both from a gay perspective that you're of course not sure that the other person is gay, but also from a human perspective that you don't normally just stare at other people like that. And then in the next scene we see Kip hanging out with his close friends at this bar and they talk about this situation. And it all just feels very real the way that they talk about it. There's the attraction, the speculation, the fantasizing, the intrigue, the awkwardness, the nerves, the uncertainty. Everything that happens in a situation like this. Though they do have the line of the friend saying,
I mean, he's definitely not gay, but...
Shut the fuck up, you literally blush.
Jesus Christ.
Make him? I feel like that's quite a fucked up thing to say, and I feel like the show doesn't realize it is, but yeah. Whatever. I was watching this and I was feeling like this is already such a high level above the other storyline, but I don't know, I don't want to get my hopes up too much. But then we get an insight into what Kip's home situation looks like. He lives at home with his dad, who's extremely loving and sweet and supportive. And the two of them clearly have a very healthy father and son relationship. And then Kip does the catering job and he messes up when he runs into Scott again. Kip apologizes to his boss and his boss is like, hey, it's okay, you're not a fuck up, relax, and get your shit together. And then Scott and Kip talk. Kip apologizes for spilling on him, and Scott apologizes for standing right in front of the door. Wow. Okay. You kind of got me now. This episode and these first 20 minutes is everything that the other storyline isn't. I just instantly feel a connection to every character I see, even the ones that have less than 5 lines. Everything feels so much more real. They haven't broken the character and setting just to get over to the sex scene. They earn every step there, which makes the sex scene feel so much more meaningful because it acts as a payoff for both of these characters. Even afterwards, Kip is about to leave in the middle of the night because he knows that Scott has a game tomorrow and he doesn't want to disturb him. But Scott then asks if he can stay. Kip says yeah, and Scott then responds to him,
Then stay, please.
like, dude, there's so much happening here. Both the sex scene in between Ilya and Shane in episode 1 and the sex scene in between Kip and Scott in episode 3 come almost exactly after 20 minutes, but they are night and day in terms of writing quality. Episode 1 showed two quite unlikable characters that have been very empty built and no connection to one another, who just rushed into an empty sex scene. Whilst here, we see two guys who have gone through all of the phases of building up a connection, and we have also been shown what these guys are like as characters, ultimately culminating in a sex scene for the two of them. Even in the next scene, we get like a declaration of love almost from Scott that comes way too soon. Like after some flirting days and one night and one morning together, Scott talks as if he really, really likes Kip. But this is where the writing of this episode shows its strength. He even say before, like, people say I'm intense, but is that okay? Can I be intense? And he even expresses that he knows that it's crazy and they barely know each other. Scott is expressing a vulnerability that he feels like he usually can't, and he is very aware of how that can come off, so he is approaching with caution. And Kip embraces him. And then we get the sex scenes in the montage of the weeks to follow, and it feels so much more earned because it serves the narrative purpose of showing these two guys growing closer to one another. Later on down the line, we get the scene where it is that they are out and browsing art for Scott's apartment, and Scott is kind of freaking out about the idea of media exposure and that they will be seen together. And the whole thing where Scott gets paranoid and runs off, this can very easily be arbitrarily written in where they start to fight and say fucked up things to one another. But they both handled this very maturely, of Scott saying that he couldn't get rid of his paranoia and Kip being very understanding about it. And during their conflict towards the end, they don't write them into a silly fight where they start screaming at each other. The conflict comes around very organically and it's very maturely handled from both parts. There is no bad intentions and there's nothing wrong with these two guys as people. Their life and wants and needs just don't go together right now. And then we get the only moment from the entire show that actually got some emotions out of me. Kip comes back home and he is embraced by his father, who can tell that Kip is upset.
Hey,
I'm sorry.
for what? You got nothing to be sorry for, silly.
Like, there's so much dialogue and events dedicated to building the relationship in between these characters and getting us connected even to the side characters. Where the fuck is this for our two main characters? I cannot tell you the whiplash I experienced going from episode 3 to episode 4, where we're back with Ilya and Shane. Ilya being charming nothing, and Shane being fucking boring nothing. All of these scenes just being arbitrary dialogue leading to empty sex scenes. And it's so annoying as well, because we almost get a moment of character with Ilya being on the phone with his father and his brother. When Ilya comes back, it looks for a second that we're gonna get some character. Shane understanding that he talks to his dad on the phone and then asking a little bit of like, what's about? Is everything okay? It looks for a second like we're gonna hear how he feels about this conflict in his life and how it affects him as a person. But before we get any of that, the show just goes, okay, you know what? Enough talking. Take a second time! Then there's the conflict of Shane getting a girlfriend and then them being at the same club and dancing with different girls and everything like that. And the music choice in the background is so cringy and on the nose. The music being like, I feel cornered, I feel lost, being with you has opened my eyes, this is not enough. Fucking hell, this is so cringy, man. But in the beginning of episode 5, I think it kind of dawned on me a little bit. The breakup between Shane and Rose is quite well handled, and I think it's mostly because I feel like I like Rose as a character. So then automatically I kind of like this scene because of her very sweet approach to this conflict in their relationship. And that's kind of the issue with this show. Both of the main characters are quite dull and flat, especially Shane. They do have occasional chemistry in between one another with their banter and everything, but it's quite rare, unfortunately. In the final episodes, they do try to do some character work for Ilya and Shane. Shane declares his love to Ilya, and Ilya doesn't oppose, more that it would mean that he couldn't go back to Russia. Then Ilya's father dies, and he has the fight with his brother and so on. And that scene in itself is quite solid, but Ilya's backstory of his family is so irrelevant to his character that this moment just ends up feeling so flat for it. But it does lead to a scene that I do think is quite solid. Ilya essentially confessing everything that's on his mind, but in Russian, so Shane doesn't understand it. The scene is quite well delivered and portrayed from Ilya's actor, despite it being very easy screenwriting of just main character says what's on their mind. But I think that with Ilya's performance and the way that it's directed, it does come out quite well. The issue is though that Shane really looks like he's sleeping in this scene. And it really took me out of the moment because I thought that this was building to the conflict of Shane falling asleep on the other line and then Ilya would be upset about it. But apparently that was just what he looked like when he was listening. I don't know what that whole thing was, but to be honest, the actor that plays Shane is just not very good. Then Shane gets injured and is out for the rest of the season, something you would assume would have a huge effect on the plot, but ultimately it doesn't really affect anything. Then we all of a sudden get our payoff for Scott and Kip's storyline, where Scott decides to come out very publicly. And just like in season 3, this tiny sequence is so much stronger than the rest of the episode. It is very skillfully directed and performed, and it feels so real for these two characters, and it is quite a strong payoff for their storyline. I mean, I can't tell you, when I started the finale on Shane's speech, I was like, yes, please, can we bin the other storyline and just continue with these two guys? But no, after that opening scene, we never see them again. We stay on Ilya and Shane in the summer house, and honestly, this episode is such a drag. Okay, look. I couldn't care less for these two characters. I find Ilya charming and funny at times, but I find the screenwriters just mostly being like, here you go, be outgoing. of your, whilst Shane bore me to death. So their dialogues that they have doesn't interest me whatsoever because I don't care about these two characters. Now, if it was that their dialogues achieved something else for the characters, that would be a whole other story. But their dialogues are very flat character-wise. Now, it is a bit better than it was in the first few episodes that was just empty of character. I mean, here we do scratch the surface on Ilya's tragic family backstory, how Shane is jealous of Svetlana, how they would go about getting Ilya an American passport, but it still isn't really substantial and doesn't really provide much insight into what is going on in these characters' minds. Especially not when comparing to Scott and Kip, who are both very fleshed out characters. Other than those dialogues, it's just more empty sex scenes. Then there is the crisis situation of Shane's parents catching the two of them in the summer house. Now, this crisis ultimately kind of goes nowhere. I mean, there are some sweet moments, and I especially like the line from his mother where she says, "I'm sorry I made you feel like you couldn't tell me." But it's mostly just empty talks. Very little happens on a character, plot, and thematic level. Then the show ends. What a fucking waste of time. Okay, look, obviously me not being attracted to men, I'm not gonna find the sex scenes very arousing, so I don't have that part of the show. But sex scenes in stories are not just sex scenes. It's a narrative tool that you can use and should use sparingly. The sex scenes in between Kip and Scott acts as a payoff for those two characters. But the other sex scenes in between Shane and Ilya are just empty of meaning, so why not just watch porn? And as I said in the beginning, this review is me trying to look how this works as a story and not like a Netflix produced porno. And as a story, it's an empty, bloated, contrived mess. And what annoys me is that every scene with Scott and Kip is infinitely better than all of the ones with Ilya and Shane. So who was the ghost writer director who came in for just that episode? How did those scenes come with such an immense jump in quality from the rest? What's insane about it is that it's actually not connected to the main storyline and it almost wraps up by itself. So honestly, you can just watch episode 3 and then their 2 final scenes. You've saved yourself 5 hours of time, so congrats. Now, this show has been praised to no end, which I think is a shame because there is very, very little substance to the main story. But hey, apparently that's not what people watch this show for, so if it is that you just want to watch softcore gay porn, then I guess this show is perfect for you. But if you're like me and looking for substance and meaning, then outside of episode 3, I cannot recommend this show at all. And of course, I'm not trying to take away anything from the people who feel very seen by this story. But if you want to watch a queer story that actually has some substance and meaning to the characters and thematics and plot of it, go watch Moonlight, go watch Portrait of a Lady on Fire, go watch Brokeback Mountain. Infinitely better stories. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. I have a feeling that the fan base of this show might be quite an aggressive one online, so we'll see if I'll survive to the end of the year. But if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and hope you guys enjoyed my take on this whole thing. I also have a full reaction video to the Stranger Things behind the scenes documentary that is currently in a bit of a copyright situation, and it will most likely first come out in like 2-3 weeks, which I'm very, very sorry for, and trust me, I'm very, very upset about that myself, but it's out of my hands at this point. It might be irrelevant when it comes out, but I'm hoping that you still will enjoy it. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to see what I talk about next, and like and comment and everything like that. I want to hear what you guys think about this whole thing, and also hear if you had the same feelings about this show as I did, or if you think I'm just, I don't know, homophobic or something like that, which doesn't make sense because I praised Scott and Kip, but you can try it anyways. So yeah, thank you for watching, and see you guys.